How's it going, everybody? My name is Mike Wasserman. I go by Strung Out One on PokerStars. Today I'm going to be running you through a couple of blind versus blind spots in ICMIZER 2, just so you guys can see the math behind some of the decisions, some of the options that you have in very common blind versus blind situations. This is the first video in a series of videos I'll be putting together for you guys. It's free content. I hope you find the information useful. If you do, hit that thumbs up button, and let's get right into it. The first spot that we're going to be focusing on is we are in the big blind facing a small blind shove. And let's jump right into the hand. So first thing I'm going to do is come into ICMIZER, and I changed the stack sizes slightly. So the small blind has 11 big blinds. Okay, and we have 25 big blinds. So the blinds are 2,000, 4,000. This is a standard spot that you might find, right? It folds to the small blind, he jams 11 big blinds, and we're in the big blind here. So what can we call with profitably? Well, the first thing we're going to have to do, the first thing that I personally like to do with ICMIZER is I calculate Nash equilibrium. Okay, so we click that, and that's going to show that he should be jamming approximately 66% of hands. So what does that look like? All pairs, basically anything decent that's suited except for the real trashy stuff. And then anything decent that's not suited except for some jack highs, some 10 and 6 highs, but all the garbage he folds. So that's about 2/3 of hands. And I actually think that this is not an unreasonable range for him to be jamming. Okay? And given that he jams this range, this is one of the few times where ICMIZER is actually probably pretty close to accurate. So it says that we can call with 48% of hands. So that means when we look down at deuces, we can profitably call. But first we're going to hit calculate. Okay? So this is what our profitable calls look like. Okay? We're going to set the min difference in EV to, I'd say, about half a big blind, maybe a little bit more. We'll say 0.6 to be conservative. So if you're gaining 0.6 bigs or more, I think that this is a perfectly fine call. Okay. As you get slightly shorter, so here we have 25 big blinds to start the hand, but let's say that we had 11, and now we're calling for our tournament life. Well, you might want to reconsider the spot and maybe jam. You want to be the one jamming, not calling. So this is a spot where we can afford, and we can come back if we call and lose. And you can see here that King 5 off is gaining 3/4 of a big blind if we call his all in here. And that's assuming that he's jamming 66% of hands. Okay. Now let's say that we'll change this up a little bit, and we'll say that he's a little bit tighter. Okay, so let's say this is a tight opponent. Let's change his jamming range. Let's give him a more solid jamming range. We'll say Queen 8, take out the Jack 7s, take out all this stuff. We're going to keep his king highs in. And we can keep that in. Yeah, this is a cleaner jamming range. Okay? So assuming that he's jamming 42% of hands, how does that affect our calling range? Well, we have the King 5 here. Now it's clearly not a call. We're losing almost a full big blind every time we call. So if he's on the tighter side, we don't want to call here. If he's on the looser side, we can pretty comfortably call with the King 5. And then just to have an idea, look at how different hands run. Like, look at Ace 2 suited. I always like to give this as an example. Ace 2 suited, if we call, and I'm sure most of you call here with Ace 2 suited, you're gaining 1.42 bigs against this range. Whereas Ace 2 off is only gaining 0.78 bigs. It's almost half the profitability of the suited hand, the suited version of it. And I think that's just something definitely to keep in mind when you're making these decisions. Ace-2 off is not the same thing as ace-2 suited. Ace-2 suited literally is like 1.8 times as good. Almost 2 times as good. So, yeah, king-5 off, not a call if he has a tighter jamming range. King-5 off when he's looser, it is a call. So I think that that's a cool example and a very simple one for you to look at. Now, let's change this up again and say that this is going to be slightly more complicated. But let's say that it folds to him in the small blind and he decides to limp in. Okay, so we're going to go in here. We're going to say that he calls 4,000. And so we have to put in a range. Okay, now this is like a range that I already put in. For this particular player, he's an aggressive regular. He used to be a PokerStars pro. I can make some assumptions about his range here. He's going to be limp trapping with some hands pretty infrequently. So we'll put in aces and kings. Assume that he has those hands as traps. Everything else that he limps here is going to be really trashy hands that he didn't want to jam pre-flop, but he still wants to maybe see a flop if I check it back. So if he limps in from the small blind with these hands, there is a non-zero chance that I check in the big blind, in which case he's free rolling to hit the flop or to win the hand in some other way. Like he can bet the flop when he misses, and now he has a chance to win the hand. Whereas if he walks me with all these garbage hands, then he has no chance of winning the hand, right? He's just forfeiting the hand, forfeiting the chips. So a lot of people choose to put in that extra half of a big blind just for a chance to win the hand. So we can assume that he's going to jam. Basically, maybe he'll walk me with the weaker suited hands. And like you can see down here, these aren't highlighted. So he'll maybe walk me with these hands. He'll probably jam this. But then everything, he's going to jam 7-6 suited probably. So everything above these highlighted hands here, he's going to jam. Okay? And everything above these highlighted hands outside of it, he's going to jam. So his range looks like this. So he's limping about 30% of hands. And he's going to limp call with aces and kings. So we're assuming that he's trapping, but he's not trapping very often. And let's calculate the profitability here. So this is a situation where it's kind of weird the way the profitability works with queens and jacks and tens, assuming that he limp traps with aces and kings every time, which he doesn't. Unfortunately, we can't weight aces and kings in this program. In Flopzilla, we can weight it, so we can account for the fact that he only limp traps 1 out of 5 times. But in this program, we can't do that. So we're just going to assume that aces and kings, he limp traps. So it's going to skew the profitability here for some of these pairs. But I digress. When you see a chart like this and you're trying to calculate the profitability, the first thing you want to do is go back and check the ranges and make sure you have the ranges input properly. Okay? Because you don't want a false reading like this. If you're thinking you can jam every hand profitably, but you're wrong, you're going to put yourself in some hurtful situations. But when you're right, this is a gold mine. Okay, so if somebody's just limping here and not thinking about it with their trashy hands or their middling hands, people that aren't as familiar with jamming ranges as they should be, and that's one of the first things you all should be studying up on because it's very straightforward and it's pretty solved at this point. So he limps here, and we can look down at king 5 off, and we can jam and gain basically 0.75 bigs, which is 3/4 of a big blind. And remember, you're comparing how much you're gaining in chips versus the shortest stack. That's called the effective stack size. So we're gaining 0.75 bigs versus his 11 big blind stack. So what does that work out to? 0.77 bigs divided by 11 bigs. So we're gaining about 7% increase to his stack when we jam. On average, in the actual hand, we're gaining 11K, which is a quarter of his chips. But on average over time, we're only gaining 7% of his stack, which is like almost a big blind, right? It's 3K. It's 3,000 chips. And you can change the settings here in ICMIZER. You can change chip EV, ICM EV, and this is good for like final table reviews and ICM percentage. I generally have it on chip big blind EV, but you can also have it on just straight chip EV and make your decisions based off of that. I've really familiarized myself with big blind EV, so that's what I use. But every now and then I check these other settings, especially at final tables. So let's say that we had a hand like Jack 7 off and he limped here. If his range is similar to what I put in, well, we are gaining 0.8 bigs. You know, if we have a hand like 9-3 suited, we're gaining 1.13 bigs. Pretty crazy, right? This stuff is like really, really eye-opening once you look at it. And this program is really good, really good. 4-5 suited, 1.3 bigs. Deuces, a little over a big blind. 3 deuce suited, 1.47 bigs. This is, without a doubt, some of the most eye-opening stuff. When I first figured this out and first saw this in ICMIZER, I was just like blown away at the profitability of a lot of these spots. If somebody's limping a lot of hands on these shorter stack sizes, well, these are the hands you can jam. Now, other situations that I'll go to in future videos, I'll show you the profitability of jamming over an open. Like, so let's say that the button opened and you're in the big blind. What hands can you jam with? What hands should you jam with? How much profitability should you look for? Well, that's the questions that I'm answering right now for this particular scenario. One was, when he jams, what can we call with? The other one is, when he limps, what can we jam with? So now you have the answer to both of those questions. That's going to wrap it up for this video. If you guys are interested in more in-depth and advanced analysis, you can check out the links in the description below. And I always appreciate your guys' feedback. Did you think the ranges I put in were correct? Do you think they should have been changed a little bit? Did you have any idea that you could call with King 5 profitably in certain situations, or that you could jam 3 deuce in other situations profitably? Let me know in the comment section below the video. This has been Mike for grips.com. Thank you so much for watching, and now you know what to do. Take what you learn, go out there, and get stacking.